The Outer Reach. How exotic. Unfortunately, I believe the Imperium no longer recognizes a number of those planets.
Yes, the so-called barbarian worlds. Precisely the issue we barbarians are here to address.
The 6th episode in Foundation's 2nd season deals with the idea of faith. This isn't the first time since the Foundation has entered its religious phase, and it made me think that a few episodes back when I described Brother Constant, I called her a true believer based on her faith in Hari Seldon's plan. After a touch of overindulgence in the eye of the Empire on the Prophet's expense account, Poly Verisof's words make a distinction between belief and faith, and I think this is an interesting idea that relates to all the different stories. In Poly's view, he was there to see Hari Seldon walk out of the vault, so it was easy for him to believe. But Constant's generation only had second or third hand accounts to go off, so their faith required a bigger commitment. There's an interesting distinction there. And you can apply this to Gaal, who finds herself in the middle of a tug-of-war between Tellem and Hari, whose different positions require her to move in the direction of one or the other. Or Salvor, who is still the odd man out and not sure what she should believe. Or even Hober, who didn't have a lot of faith in anything but himself, and who finds himself in the middle of something by the end of this episode. And then you have Brother Day, who has a unique belief in himself that hasn't existed in the clones that preceded him, and it doesn't seem like that's leading him in the right direction. Oh, and it's also about revenge. The title's a reference to Yana telling Hari about the saying, "The gods made wine to compensate those who can't afford revenge." In her mind, if the Empire wants to hurt them, then why not turn things around and hurt the Empire? It sounds a little too reckless for Hari when he first hears this, but the fact that he requests the text by that author when he eventually arrives on Trantor years later after her death is a pretty strong indicator that he's changed his mind. And that's not even to mention that he traded in the clean-shaven look he had on Helicon for the Walter White goatee he's wearing when he faces the increased gravity on Trantor. Hober Mallow's story is the quickest to get through, so why don't we start there? We see him arrive at the coordinates Dr. Seldon gave him in the vault, only to find out there's nothing there. Not at first, anyway. After his ship starts to malfunction and Becky gets a little anxious, an absolutely giant, what I guess we'll call a ship, appears in the distance. He docks the Spirit and enters what turns out to be the Spacer's home swarm. We don't get a better description of that, and this thing looks really otherworldly, so if it's not a ship, I guess it's a mobile artificial planet, because it obviously moves around. They don't look happy that he's there, but we only see them ask who he is and why he's there before it cuts away. Although we can kind of put together why Hari sent him there from clues in previous episodes and a brief exchange Constant has with the Spacer when she arrives on Trantor. Belrios had been exiled to a prison world where they mined a substance called opalesque. After he was reinstated and returned to his ship, She-Ben's Light made a joke about him mining for all those years and not bringing her any. We know that the Empire is dependent on these genetically modified humans to navigate their jump ships, and this practice has been in place for 600 years or so. From that conversation, it appears that spacers need opalesque to live how they do or something along those lines, and they can only get it from the Empire. In exchange, the Empire gets what amounts to slave labor on their ships. This arrangement would also keep things exclusive and keep anyone else from controlling jump ships prior to the Foundation's breakthrough with their whisper ships. So from all of that, we can imagine that Hari thinks he might be able to upset the Empire's arrangement or disrupt their ability to jump around the galaxy freely or something along those lines, which could present real problems for the Cleons. And based on the other things we've been watching in this season, it would just be adding to a growing list of problems. We see Brother Day hold an event where he speaks to the public and members of the Galactic Council. He unveils a new statue of Cleon I's mother, Winneset, the last Galactic Empress, and then introduces Sareth as his future bride and therefore the next Empress. This makes his intention to end the Genetic Dynasty official, and we don't get much insight into what the Galactic Council thinks about this, or who they are, or what they do, really, but Dusk and Dawn are clearly not pleased. Of course, by design, Demerzel is hard to read, but it stands out that they cut to a shot of her touching her bracelet as he says the words. While it's her job to serve the Cleons, to me this indicates that she's struggling with conflicting thoughts. After he's made his announcement and is about to leave, Sareth surprises him, and not in a good way, when she starts addressing the crowd. She basically promises to be a leader who will serve the people, and her flowery words elicit a collective "what the hell are you doing" response from everyone on the platform. Elsewhere on Trantor, I mentioned that Constant and Poly are now there. After Poly explains he's on a diplomatic mission from the Outer Reach to their version of customs and immigration, they set off for a night out in the capital. When they return to their room, he has Constant flush his drugs, and seems to be on a path to rehabilitation where he delivers that speech about belief and faith. And then the customs officer returns to take them into custody in a scene that feels like a direct callback to Gaal's first night on Trantor. This makes us reevaluate Dr. Seldon's decision to send them there in the first place. This seems like a fairly predictable outcome given the current situation. It brings into question Vault Hari's intentions, but that's something we'll come back to on Ignus through what the other Hari tells Salvor. For now, things don't look great for the religious pilgrims. At this point, it would seem pretty shocking if they both ended up executed or something along those lines. Objectively, Constant would be the character who has more legs, and that Poly is nearing the end of his natural life either way, and he has experienced some great things already, but we'll have to wait to learn more about their fates because their part of the episode ends there. Everything else in the episode is related to Ignus. Salvor tells Hari she's been having strange dreams ever since they arrived. She thinks it's the place and that other people's dreams are bleeding into hers. This makes Hari glad he's not a mentalic, but that's probably not a feeling that he holds on to for long. Salvor talks to the young boy Josiah, who we met in the previous episode, and he tells her that the mentalics all communicate silently in a practice they call unvoicing. She can't do it naturally, but he's certain that she'll be able to learn, and he explains that Tellem taught them by using their own unique musical pitch. He has a very noticeable scar on his neck and explains that he got it because he's always been able to hear other people's thoughts. He's able to touch her and share his memory of a flashback of his family being killed by an angry mob, with Tellem arriving right after his throat was cut. She's horrified by what he's been through and moved to see that Tellem saved him, and he says that she's saved everyone on the planet. When they join the rest of the group, they also touch her and pass on their personal stories to show that this is true. When they meet with Tellem, she explains that mentalics are generally seen in two ways: as gods among men or wolves among sheep. Because the god thing gets old and the wolf thing gets you killed, she prefers her plan of them keeping to themselves. This philosophy means that she's not interested in her children becoming Hari's second foundation. She's seen the outlines of psychohistory in Gaal's mind and feels like Hari is trying to make an army out of her collective that seems more than capable of staying hidden in this sanctuary they've developed. He brings up Gaal's vision of the mule, which means they won't be able to hide forever, and Tellem doesn't believe that Gaal can really see the future. From the time they've set foot on Ignus, we've seen that mentalics are capable of doing some amazing things, but apparently none of them have true precognitive abilities. So once again, Gaal is an outlier. Salvor pushes Gaal to show Tellem the vision, which does appear to convince her, and then they go off to have a private conversation. They discuss how things are sticky with the Salvor situation. They've just met, and it feels like she should love her, but it's still kind of weird and all of that. In relation to the vision, Tellem says she can't accept an inescapable future, and neither should Gaal. In her mind, their actions have to mean something. She seems genuinely supportive, but also sees an angle of her own. She plants the seed that Hari's influence is the problem, and that he prevents Gaal from knowing what her vision is because it's been filtered through perceptions that were shaped by him. Then on her way out, she reveals that it's Salvor's birthday. She's having a private conversation with Hari. She makes a great point that Hari was essentially immortal, and putting him in a body just made him more vulnerable. She's been trying to figure out why this Kali figure would want to do that. Hari figures it's because a messianic story requires death and resurrection. She counters that he already had that when the other version emerged from the vault and offers a different motivation. What if Calais was worried that he would reduce everyone to numbers if he wasn't careful? Maybe she wanted him to have some skin in the game. This is all filtered through the lens of her not wanting Gaal to forget that there are people on all those planets she's saving. They discuss Gaal's blaming Hari for what happened to Rach and the future she envisioned with him. And it comes out that Rach deserves some of the blame because he knew everything. He knew they were doomed and he kept that information to himself. And he still chose to be with her. Hari says the heart wants what the heart wants and says that Gaal won't turn into him with Salvor by her side. He thinks she cares too much about what her daughter thinks of her. While they're talking, Hari realizes that it must be hard for Salvor to be on Ignus focusing on the third crisis, while Terminus faces the second. She believes they'll win because they have to, but she can't help but feel that she's helping him build an army specifically to fight the people she swore to protect. Hari explains that the point is not to fight the First Foundation. They just need to prod them when necessary. And she wonders then about Vault Seldon, why can't he do that? And he explains that his fundamental knowledge has been edited. He only knows part of the plan. He can't know that this Hari exists because his information has to be limited. This Hari has the ability to monitor what he's doing through the Prime Radiant because of the way they're connected. And that means to look into that is to look into what the other one is doing. Tellem stops by the beggar to officially have a one-on-one with Gaal, but also to try to find the Prime Radiant, which I think just turns out to be unfolded and hidden in plain sight on the table. Later, we'll see Dr. Taj overlook it in Hari's office on Helicon while it's laid out the same way, so as far as I can tell, there's no top secret hiding place that they're missing. They have a back and forth with a lot of twists and turns, and even a brief battle where we get some insights into how the Mentalics use their powers. But what it all comes down to is that Tellem is not well and wants Gaal to become her replacement. She believes her children would follow her, and she'll prepare her by teaching her to use her gifts. She can even call them the Second Foundation if she wants to, because even though he's still more than 100 years in the future, she is concerned about the mule. What Gaal gets is the tools that could help keep Salvor alive, and all she has to give up in return is Hari. Tellem is very protective of the Mentalics. She doesn't want any outsiders there at all, and for that reason, Hari would have to go. They go out and find them, and Gaal tells Hari that the Mentalics will only follow one of their own, that he needs to let her take the lead. He immediately turns things around and asks if Tellem offered to save Salvor in return. Did she make her believe that that was possible? And he points out the problem of forming an alliance with someone who can put anything in your head. While he's talking, it looks like something is going on with his mind. We see the frame sort of go out of focus around the edges. And then Tellem asks him about what happened on Helicon. She puts out some specific details from an accident that we'll see later, and then he storms off saying, if you can't trust your own mind, then what have you got? Salvor catches up with Hari, who doesn't look well and is barely coherent when she asks about Makota Mesa. He tells her they're after the Prime Radiant, it's on the beggars, and it won't look like itself. Find it, protect Gaal, she needs you, and then he leaves. She goes to Gaal, who presents her with a nice piece of fruit for her birthday, and it's awkward, but also kind of sweet, and they have one of their more sincere mother and daughter moments. It's cut short, though, because they hear the beggar's engines firing up, and when they look, they see what they think is Hari piloting it and taking off. This all turns out to be a sleight of hand by Laron and the other Mentalics, and we find out that Tellem has the real Hari chained up in a pool of rising water that is currently up to his shoulders. They took the beggar so they can continue to search for the Prime Radiant. The plan is to find it and destroy it. Gaal and Salvor will think Hari left them there, and Tellem can get rid of her problem by drowning Hari. It doesn't seem like Gaal will be alright with that, but she thinks that she can just control their minds, essentially, and tell her that they only kill when they need to for nourishment and self-defense, and that's her plan. As Hari struggles against the rising tide, he has a flashback to his childhood when he was with his parents, who are shepherds. They shepherd these flying animals off a cliff so that they can graze on a moon that the planet shares an atmosphere with. These moon strikes can only do that if they can break free from the planetary gravity, so they have to really work at it. They have to be running really fast when they go over. And the young Hari studies the way they approach the cliff and spots a pattern, which he uses to scare the hell out of his parents when he walks out and stands in the middle of their stampede without getting hurt. Then we jump forward some to see the day when he first meets his life partner, Yana. He's speaking to this character, Dr. Taj, who is expressing concerns that Empire has about his research into psychohistory, and Yana appears outside his office. It's clear the way that this is set up that she knows who he is and about his work and that she wants to work with him. So when she goes in and sets up in his office and tells Dr. Taj not to worry about psychohistory, it's all part of her plan. And after she leaves, Yana tells Hari that she thinks his work is brilliant, but he just needs some help to make it practical, and that's the help that she's there to give. We see that their relationship gets romantic. They move in together, and we see Hari bring home the prototype of the Prime Radiant to show her. She tells him she's pregnant and that they're having a girl, and gives him a chain to wear that lets him feel their heartbeats right there on his chest. He has a pretty public argument with Dr. Taj outside his office, and it's all in response to her bringing him a generous offer of full professorships at Streeling University on Trantor, which we know he'll eventually work at. Hari is against the idea on principle and underestimates how much pressure is on Taj to deliver him or the Prime Radiant to Empire. Yana tries to get him to consider it because she believes they won't stop until they get what they want, and that because Dr. Taj's life is on the line, there's a real chance that things could get out of hand, but he says he can't do it. He says it would be impossible for him to work there, that it would be suffocating. She does try to spin things around with the revenge angle that I brought up earlier, saying that they should go there because when they're there, that's the best place for them to undermine the Empire, but he won't listen. And this decision will cost Yana her life after she's taken hostage. Taj is trying to get Hari to give up the Prime Radiant. Because of the chain she gave him, he knows the exact moment when this goes wrong, and both her and the unborn baby die. He sets up an exchange with Taj, and he hacks her car and her gun and really sets up a plan to take her out. He takes her to the cliff where the moonstrikes are shepherded and gets his revenge for Yana by killing her. He sort of gives her a chance to talk her way out of it, but I find it interesting how they set this up because Yana's death and his decision that led to that are things that will bother him for the rest of his life. Obviously, we're seeing him thinking about this in his dying moments, but we're also seeing him make a decision to carry this out in a very vindictive way. This is certainly not the first idea you come up with when you're wanting to get revenge on someone and kill them. He does decide beforehand, and he plans it out in this big gesture that is absolutely terrifying for his victim. And all of these things are decisions, so what does that tell us about this character? Then we see that he's taken the job on Trantor. And I don't know how you interpret that other than to say that he's following through with her plan of being on Trantor so he can get his revenge against Empire. This is an additional layer, because prior to this, the only motivation we thought that Hari had was that he developed psychohistory, he saw what the math was saying, and he wanted to help mankind. Knowing that Empire is responsible for Yana means that it's at least a little bit personal. Then the episode ends when we return to Ignus to see him die. As Salvor brought up earlier, his new body did make him vulnerable, and Tellem followed through on her promise. This is one of those episodes that almost had too much going on for me to really enjoy it as much as I did some of the other ones. There's a ton of interesting stuff in every scene, but it had the effect that my mind didn't move on from one place to the next as easily as I'd grown accustomed to. I suppose right in the middle of the season it makes sense that you'd run into this with so many balls in the air, and so I'm curious to see where things go next. I was rather shocked that they gave Hari a new body just to kill him off. There was this sense of him and Salvor coming around to each other, and now I imagine she'll have to step up to pull Gaal out from under Tellem's control. Because we're still dealing with the inevitability of there being a second foundation, but you can't really see that working out without some sort of reckoning with Tellem after she did this. Learning more about Hari's backstory certainly made him more of a complicated character, and I guess they could just continue that story in future flashbacks. But I also wonder if this is really the end of his consciousness, since it's been resurrected once already from its digital form. This was a sad story. You see that he has regrets for things that he did, things that he could have done differently, and how the whole situation affects him in the way that he deals with everyone else, like in the part of the story that we've already seen. I was very interested to see the Spacers get introduced, and I hope we see more of Hober's story with them in the next episode. Just like I was hoping to see Sareth reveal that she knew Demerzel was a robot in this episode, it's interesting that Dr. Seldon knew where to find them. And I wonder what they'll think about the Whisper ship that would on the one hand make them obsolete, but on the other might be their path to freedom. Brother Day's arrogance was fun to watch, and what I think was a smart move by Sareth, even though it pissed him off, it does give her more visibility and maybe makes it harder for him to just dispose of her. Was she being sincere in what she said? I don't think at this point there's any way to say for sure. The other thing about the Empire side of things was I feel like this is the first time we saw the Galactic Council. I know they were mentioned in the Season 1 finale, but they haven't really played much of a part in how we see Empire run things. So I was a little disappointed we didn't see more of them. There's a lot to look forward to now that things are coming together. And since there was so much that happened in this episode that I had to get through, I think that's a great place to leave things. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.